Hey guys, welcome back to the program. Today we're going to have a look at my George Romero Living Dead home media collection. We're not going to talk too much about the movies themselves. Obviously, I'm a huge fan. If you do want to hear some of my thoughts in a little more detail, I'm often a guest on the podcast Wheel of Horror, and we've covered Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead. We still have to cover Day of the Dead. But we've also covered Creepshow and George Romero's Martin. So lots of Romero coverage over at Wheel of Horror. Check it out. So Night of the Living Dead has a long, complicated behind-the-scenes history. It was released dozens, if not hundreds of times. I first saw it on VHS. Unfortunately, I don't have that tape with me. It is back home in storage. But when I saw the movie, I absolutely fell in love with it. And not long after, I picked this up, which is Night of the Living Dead on Laserdisc from Elite. And this was a huge leap in quality as far as picture and audio goes. Of course, on VHS, you never really knew what you were going to get with Night of the Living Dead because anyone could release it. It was in the public domain. Jumping ahead to the DVD days, here is Night of the Living Dead, also by Elite. So this is probably the same scan as the Laserdisc with a ton of special features. And here we have a restored, remastered version. I believe this was released by Miramax. And this has a pretty great feature-length documentary on it called One for the Fire. And here we have the 30th anniversary edition of Night of the Living Dead. Now, this release is a bit controversial. So John Russo, who was George Romero's collaborator on Night of the Living Dead, went back in the late 90s and shot more footage and inserted it into the movie. And I think this movie even has a brand new score. So all of this is a bit sacrilegious, especially if you're a fan of this movie. I mean, Night of the Living Dead is like a perfect movie. I absolutely do not recommend this movie, but I was curious. So if you're curious, it's not hard to track down, but I wouldn't expect much. And here we have the really great Criterion Collection Blu-ray, and it has a beautiful brand new 4K scan. I actually saw this version of the movie in theaters. It played at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and George Romero was there, and he actually spoke after the screening. And it was shortly before he died, so I'm really glad I was able to be there for that. And the movie looked great, and I'm so glad that it's commercially available now. Moving on to Dawn of the Dead. This is my original VHS copy that I found in a pawn shop. This is the theatrical version of the movie, my favorite version of the movie, and I think George Romero's favorite too. And speaking of different versions of the movie, here is the director's cut on Laserdisc. And it's called the director's cut, but I think that's just marketing. It's an extended version, but I think George Romero's preferred version was the theatrical cut. And yet another Laserdisc copy of Dawn of the Dead. This is the widescreen director's cut once again, but this one is filled with special features. And I actually have the theatrical cut on Laserdisc too, but that is back home in storage. Moving on to Dawn of the Dead on DVD. This was a really fantastic release. I believe it had 4 discs, 3 different versions of the movie, the theatrical cut, the director's cut, and Dario Argento's European cut. It also comes with this little mini comic, which if you look closely, I had autographed by Ken Foree. I met Ken at a horror convention many, many years ago. It was a really great convention with lots of Living Dead veterans. It was at an old movie theater in Jersey City. and they actually did a screening of Night of the Living Dead later on in the evening. And here we have Dawn of the Dead on 4K Ultra HD, a really great release from Second Sight. I actually have not watched this yet. The last time I watched Dawn of the Dead was a couple of years ago. I actually got to see it on the big screen in 3D, no less. There was a screening in Brooklyn, a whole George Romero festival, and Dawn of the Dead was in 3D, and the producer, Richard Rubenstein, was there. He spoke about the movie a little bit. And yeah, it was a really kind of cool, interesting way to experience that movie, but I'm definitely looking forward to watching this for the first time on 4K. I've heard really great things about this release. And moving on to Day of the Dead, my original VHS copy from when I was like, I don't know, 13, 14. That's around the time I saw most of these movies. And of course, we have Day of the Dead on Laserdisc, a really great edition from Elite Entertainment. Day of the Dead on DVD, and yes, this is another autographed copy. This is from Laurie Cardill, who played Sarah in the movie. Now, I didn't meet her at a convention. I actually work in casting, and I've had the good luck to meet quite a few people from Day of the Dead just at work. And here's my Blu-ray copy. Laurie signed this as well, along with Tom Savini and George Romero. I met Tom and George at the same convention that I met Ken Foree. And if you look down here, I also have Jarlath Conroy's autograph. Jarlath I met at work. He played the helicopter pilot in Day of the Dead. I'd see him every now and then, so I brought my Day of the Dead copy in and just kind of kept it in a drawer just in case Jarlath, pops in for an audition. And he did, and he signed this, and he was a really great guy. Now, an autograph I don't have on here is Bub himself, Sherman Howard, but I actually did meet Sherman Howard at work. We had just a fun little chat. I didn't have any Day of the Dead merch on me, so I didn't ask him for an autograph or anything, but it was really cool meeting him. And I also have the Scream Factory version of Day of the Dead. And I think that is it. But while we're here, the Night of the Living Dead remake on Blu-ray, directed by Tom Savini, and the Dawn of the Dead remake from 2004, directed by Zack Snyder. All right, guys, I think that just about covers it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll be back soon with a new one.